Hi everybody and welcome to another piano comparison video here on the Merriam Pianos YouTube channel. My name is Stu Harrison and in today's video we're comparing two titans of the digital piano space. It is the Yamaha P-125, the venerable favorite from all over the world. Lots of people loving this piano. And the newbie, the Casio PXS 1100. This one's making a lot of waves. Certainly many fans made from the original PXS 1000. So let's see what this update is all about. And we're gonna compare the two. Feature to feature, function to function, sound back and forth, and let you hear and see what we're seeing here in the studio. If it is the first time that you've joined us here on the channel, we would really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you can come back for more when we're making them, and we always are coming out with new videos on a weekly basis. Without further ado, let's dive right into the comparison right away. So we are well into the year 2022, and these two instruments are likely to be some of the best-selling, hottest 88-note digital portable pianos on the market anywhere you are on Earth. Of course, we've got the Casio PXS 1100 on my left and Yamaha's P-125 on my right. The 125, been around for several years on the market, but still very much a relevant choice. The PXS 1100, very recent update to Casio's PXS 1000, which hit the market and claiming to be, and I think technically is, the slimmest and lightest fully weighted 88-note piano available in the market. So we are, just as we always do with these reviews, going to offer up some of those differences between them, contrast them, play them for you so you can hear it, and go through section by section talking about the sound and the sound generating capabilities first, then move on to action and move on to some of the other features. Something we don't often mention, but you should be aware of, is down in the description, you are going to find all kinds of links. Links to learn more about us, as well as links where you can purchase either one of these instruments, no matter where you are in the world and watching the channel. Let's get in with sound. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the speakers. The Casio 1100, and let's just call it the 1100 from here on in to shorten such a long name, 125, 1100. The speakers on the 1100 are 8 watts apiece, and they are rear facing, but they've got these sort of air ports that face up front. I think the theory here is that there is some indirect or secondary sound, you know, that still escapes through those front ports, so that as you're listening to the piano tone on the 1100, you're still getting some of those high frequencies that are reaching your ear directly, rather than completely off the reflection of, say, a far wall. But for sure, most of the sound, likely like 95% of the sound, is leaving the back of this instrument and heading out just in the way that, in a lot of ways, that like an upright piano would. So it's 8 watts a piece. Now, Casio has updated these speakers. There is some argument in terms of how much these speakers really are updated, but Casio certainly would like to characterize these changes as being pretty meaningful. I think in essence what it is they've changed the coating on the speaker cone. I think I erroneously referred to that as the tweeter. One of our regular contributors, or not contributors, but certainly commenters and members of our community, Instrumental Covers, hello there, corrected me and said, well, that's not actually the tweeter. There is just a single cone. It's not like a two-way speaker. So they've changed the coating on the cone. I think the theory here is that it creates a little more crispness or a little more definition in highs. And they've, I think, reconfigured the speaker box a little bit to allow for greater travel distance, when the tweeter is producing some of those lower frequencies. Or at least that's my understanding of it. The result, which I can speak to, is that this definitely has, it seems like a more detailed sound than what you found on the 1000. And it feels like there's also a greater level of punch, and there's virtually no way to actually get these speakers distorting, which is nice. So you're really kind of realizing the full benefit of the 8 watts, which for this size is actually pretty punchy. So I'm going to play the core piano sound on this just to give you a sense of the tone, and then we're going to flip over to the Yamaha and talk about the speakers there. It's got some really nice complexity to it. That's one of the things that I really have to give Casio a lot of credit for, is particularly on the piano engine, even in something like this price range, the nuance and the sophistication that they've added to their tone engine is actually quite impressive. It's right up there with the kind of complexity that you would get, or certainly the kind of control that you would get out of, say, the Roland Supernatural engine, or one of the more advanced Kawai harmonic imaging engines. With the Bluetooth control, which we will get to later, you can get the Cordana app, and through the Cordana app get into a very sophisticated level of control, as I've said. Just waiting for the app to come up here, on a number of categories. So there's an acoustic simulator on here. There is a option to edit the pedal, the keyboard sound source, and then you can get into the effect, which is either the Hall simulator as well as the kind of the 3D simulator, all the digital signal processing. But the acoustic simulator is where where it kind of starts to stand apart from a lot of other instruments in this price category. The FP10, of course, is not supposed to be compatible with any sort of piano designer. Some versions had access to it, some didn't, but certainly officially it was not supposed to be there. The P-125 doesn't have access to this level of control, so it's cool that they've done it. I don't think that the speakers, for as good as they are, deliver the level of detail you would need to hear this type of change. You really would need to be using a decent set of headphones to get that, but the control is there. And as you heard, the piano tone out of this thing is quite impressive. Let's head over to the P-125 now and hear some of its piano sound and talk about its speakers. So this is 7 watts a piece, but on the Yamaha, you've actually got 2 speakers happening. You've got an upward facing tweeter, which is a tweeter, and then you've got a downward facing kind of mid-range speaker, which is going to resemble something you'd see like in a car, like in a door, you know, something in this type of a size range. And the fact that Yamaha puts that upward facing speaker on there and that it's really nicely balanced with the bottom one does give you a clearer playing experience when you're in front of here and when you're at regular volumes and not using any sort of headphones. So here is the piano tone. Now this is using their CF sampling engine, so this is, I believe, an older sample set taken off the CFX, or sorry, the CFS3, and it's a nice clear sound. And in this regard, between these 2 instruments, really what you're choosing between is a more advanced tone generator with a less clear speaker system versus a clearer speaker system, but a simpler and less nuanced piano tone. And so I would say this comes down to a combination of how much you're going to be using this as a tone source, like say for recording, how much you're going to be using it with headphones or PA versus just using it with the onboard speakers. Now, this is in the default sound. If I use the Casio and turn on both the amp simulator, or not the amp simulator, but the hall simulator, as well as kind of the 3D simulator, you actually get to a point where the sense of clarity out front here is incredibly close to what you get from the Yamaha. And I'm not entirely sure why that is, because it's not as though there's more power going to the speakers, but just the way in which those effects affect the internal tone somehow gets a sonic image that is very present and very upfront versus one where it's not on at all. And so you can kind of simulate a similar level of clarity out of the speakers. But it's certainly not the same level of power in the highs that you get out of the Yamaha with the upward facing speakers. So they both have their strengths in this particular area, and it's just a matter of understanding and knowing which one is more important to you. In terms of the number of sounds to choose from, it's super similar. I think we've got 18 over here to the 21 on the Yamaha, and they're going to cover much of the same kind of tones. And we'll just give you a quick sample. You've heard the concert piano on both. Let's now hear some of the E pianos. This is with all the DSP stuff off. Here's the electric piano. It's like a DX. Like a whirly. That's cool. And then of course there's your standard and required string patches, which I happen to think on the Casio is really quite well done actually. Strings on the Yamaha. The variation 1 and some choir and pads, and then finally let's just have a listen to some of the organ sounds. And then some organs over here. So you can hear that some are a little stronger on one, some are a little stronger on the other. I happen to think that some of those E-piano sounds, particularly the digital E-piano sounds on the Yamaha, are just great. They're super lush. They sound very, very modern. I think the string patches on the Casio are a little richer. I think the E-piano sounds, the kind of the classic E-piano sounds, are a little different, but equally tied, I would say. So it's a bit of a mix, but it's a super similar level of tones that you get on these two instruments. And from an overall quality standpoint, I think both are very, very functional. Like I said, the biggest difference to me when it comes to the core piano tone on these instruments is the level of sophistication that is built into the Casio tone generator that just isn't, if it's not there, it's certainly not accessible on the Yamaha. When you get into the Yamaha app that connects with this piano, you have a little bit of functional modulation of some of the reverb settings, but really not much beyond that. So for anybody who really wants to get in there and tinker with the piano sound with string resonance, damper resonance, soundboard stuff, and all that kind of jazz that we talk about often when we're dealing with VSTs, the Casio is going to give you that extra depth of control. And honestly, you can hear it when you're listening on a really good set of headphones. There is an extra level of color and complexity to the piano tone that's going on there. In terms of sound, just one last spec to mention that they are both 192 notes worth of maximum polyphony on these instruments, which is plenty to ensure that you are going to be able to play pretty well any repertoire that you want to on these two instruments. We're going to take a super quick break. We're going to be back to talk about the action, which is, of course, always a really important subject to talk about anytime we are discussing 88-note weighted pianos. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you in a second. So let's start with the Casio. This is a smart scaled action. They created this instrument, or they created this action rather, for the original PXS 1000 and 3000. And the first thing I'm going to say is I enjoy playing on this action. I find that it's a really responsive action. I think the weighting is kind of right down the middle in terms of not feeling too light or too heavy. And I can play on this action for many, many hours and not feel exhausted in either way, because believe it or not, playing on a super light action can actually be as exhausting for your hand as playing on a really heavy one. In the one hand, an heavy action requires more effort to push down, but then you've got more resistance pushing your finger back up for you. On a light, you actually wind up having to exert a lot more energy pulling your finger back up because the key isn't doing it for you as much as where you've got a heavier action. So both can actually cause a lot of muscle strain, believe it or not. But certainly the heavier action likely has the bigger impact. This one is right down the middle. Now, this action is a highly compacted action, so there's a couple of dynamic quirks to this instrument, or to this action, that have been pointed out in a few other channels. And I'm just going to make a comment on it because I think it's deserving of some comment. One is that the black keys have been weighted heavier intentionally than the white keys. I wouldn't describe this as a flaw or an error. This was a judgment call because as the black key stick has been shortened so much, in order to ensure that the resistance remained the same, or the sense of resistance remained the same as in a regular action, and given that most people are going to be playing a black key in the front half of that action, they've weighted it a little bit heavier to equalize what might have been an offsetting effect in the opposite direction. There's another kind of effect, or an artifact, we'll say, of having compacted that action so much, which is that right at the very back of the black key, there is definitely much less travel than when you get in a normal black key from, say, a piano. Because this is almost right at the hinge, you get the sense that you're literally almost rotating the black key right at the axis point, which is not quite true, but it's close enough that the black key is going to feel really super weird if you're playing it right up at the front. Most beginners, hobbyist players, or even professional players who are playing normal repertoire are not going to notice either one of those design decisions by Casio. And I think this is a conscious decision that's been made. because of it, I would say that that's probably not the best action to start on if your intent is to become a really high-level classical player. And if that's where you're starting, this piano's action is maybe not going to be your best friend. I'd be looking at actions that have a little more depth and possibly, as I'm sure your teachers probably recommended, likely looking at some kind of an acoustic so you really truly get the right key weighting and the right key motion and the right key dynamic. But for the rest of us, we're going to be sitting down and wanting to play some modern piano tunes on an enjoyable keyboard that's nice and light and able to walk around. And I think that certainly fits the bill. The surface on the PXS 1100 Action, or the smart scaled Action I should say, is a little bit matte. It's also textured, and so feels pretty good. At times it can feel a little bit slippery, especially if you go in there with dry fingers, but anybody who has kind of an average level of moisture or greater than average level of moisture on their fingers is going to love this action, because rather than getting really super sticky and causing your fingers to catch on the keys, it still maintains a nice glide. So lots to like about the Action. It is a double sensor, not a triple sensor. So again, for people wanting to use this potentially for MIDI input, there's other options out there that'll give you the triple sensor for not that different a price range. I'm thinking FP10 being one of them, but still well executed for the price point, enjoyable to play, and nice and sensitive. So let's hop over to the Yamaha. The Yamaha uses a GHS Action. Now that's an action that's been out for a little while, and it's evolved from a long line of Yamaha plastic actions that have been around for a long time. I've got a lot of personal experience with some of those Yamaha actions, and I have been in a situation where I've been using some of these actions in incredibly intensive situations. And so I've got my own experience with these actions, and there's other actions that I prefer more when you're in really intensive playing situations. However, I also know a huge number of people who use this action and enjoy it and have absolutely no issue with it, and certainly have been able to learn on this piano without any problem at all, maintenance issue, or any type of a mechanical failure issue. So the GHS is reliable, it's out there, and it kind of has a similar level of sensitivity in my mind to what the PXS 1100 offers. It's a double sensor, it doesn't have any escapement. Oh, let's get back to piano. Sense of weight is a little bit lighter to me than on the Casio. It also has a sense that the key depth on the P-125 isn't quite as deep as what you get on the 1100. And I'd love to measure that up, because sometimes with action, well, a lot of times with action, it is as much how you are perceiving things as the actual reality. I think in the end, the thing that most people are going to notice right away is the biggest difference between these two actions really is the key surface. because the weighting isn't that different, the sense of depth isn't that different, the specs are very, very similar, double sensor, no escapement. Really, it's the fact that you've got high gloss white plastic on the white keys, high gloss black plastic on the black keys, and it sounds so obvious to say out loud, versus over on the Casio where you've got simulated ebony and ivory textures. It's more matte. There's definitely more of a glide to it than what you get on the Yamaha. And this is the kind of thing where you kind of just have to be in front of it. My own personal preference is always to have a bit of texture there because anytime I'm playing something that gets a little more aggressive or involves more leaps, sometimes a key surface to me that is stickier winds up being really uncomfortable after a while when you keep jamming your fingers into a key at an angle. On something where you've got a texture, you are always able to kind of maintain a bit of a glide. But this is super personal preference, and certainly there's a lot of instruments out there that have both of these types of things. So my suggestion is if you've never been in a situation like a showroom where you can try a lot of these things side by side, do so you can figure out what style of key surface works best for you. But that for sure is going to be the biggest takeaway, I think, from most people playing these two actions, is that key surface. We're going to take another quick break and we're going to be back to talk about a bunch of other features which may just be the deal breakers or decision makers between these two instruments if these are the two finalists on your list. We are going to be back in just a second. Thank you so much. Thanks for sticking around. Let's get right into the section on features, because this could be the clincher. Both of these instruments have just dramatically different sets of onboard features that kind of extend the playing experience and offer up extra value. And they're so different that this honestly could be the deciding point for a lot of people. Let's start with the Casio. It is battery operated. This is very, very unusual for an instrument that offers such a pianistic experience. Roland doesn't have anything that battery operates at that level. Yamaha doesn't have anything that battery operates at that level. And so this is an interesting, unique feature that some giggers might be able to take advantage of. Certainly somebody taking this to a cottage, buy a couple of packs of rechargeable batteries so we're not filling landfills up with batteries unnecessarily. But you don't need a power source for this instrument. You can load it up with batteries and away you go. That's pretty cool, fairly unique. Maybe totally meaningless to some people, may be hugely important to others. Second, this instrument has a Bluetooth capability that was not present on the 1000. This now connects Bluetooth audio and MIDI. You've seen me using the wireless connection with the app. So that is another convenience that's been added to this instrument, is the Bluetooth audio, Bluetooth MIDI. You can wirelessly connect this to computers and smart devices to extend the functionality, as well as use this as a speaker source, or not a speaker source rather, but as a speaker system, using your mobile device as a speaker source. Third thing I'm going to mention is the weight. Now, Casio certainly makes a big deal of the fact that this is the lightest, slimmest instrument on the market, and technically they're correct. It doesn't make it to that claim by like miles and miles, but it definitely is the slimmest, it definitely is the lightest. How light? Well, this is about 24.5 pounds. Not very many instruments, well, none, are going to be that low, but any even approaching kind of the 25 pound mark are few and far between. In contrast, and moving over to the Yamaha now generally, this instrument comes in at 26 pounds, so it's about 1.5 pounds heavier. Not really a deal breaker, but if you're going to be carrying it around a lot, well, 1.5 pounds if you're doing this every day may make a difference. I don't really know. 26 pounds is still super manageable in my books. Anything under 30 pounds, well, I'm used to workstations. Anything under 50 pounds is a godsend. So we've got 26 versus 24.5. Let's talk about what the Yamaha's got. It doesn't have the Bluetooth connectivity. It is not battery operated. And from the first section, we already know that the tone engine is a little less sophisticated. But what does it have? Well, this was one of the first instruments to offer an onboard USB audio interface. What is a USB audio interface, you ask? Well, it means that you can take a USB cable, plug this into a computer, and without any audio cables, it actually feeds its own digital audio straight into a DAW workstation. It also means that you can use that workstation to play music back through the Yamaha. So this is well positioned to work as a basic studio input device. You sit this on the desk, you can have it connected to Logic, Pro Tools, Studio One, whatever it is that you're using, and you can get sound playing back through here. Wouldn't exactly, suggest these as reference monitors, but it could be functional. But more importantly, if you've got this connected to any sort of laptop on a gig or something, you can use this to take the laptop audio and output it through the 1/4-inch outputs. So that could be handy. What else does this have? Well, it has an arranger function, which means, albeit basic, you can set up a number of different rhythms and it will take a harmonic cue from the left hand and essentially craft a nice little accompaniment for yourself. And that is all on board, not something the Casio does. They both, as I just indicated, have 1/4-inch discrete outputs that is separate from the headphone jack, which means no fiddling around with stupid little adapters to take audio out of this and send it over to an amplifier or a PA system. They both have pretty well all the same standard functionality beyond that. There's a basic recorder and playback on both of it. You can split the keyboard. You can kind of layer two sounds at the same time. There's onboard metronome as well. There's transpose feature and a gazillion other functions that good chance not many other people are going to use, but you get into things like being able to make slight adjustments to reverb, make slight adjustments to tuning when you can get into the manuals and look at all of the different functions that you can activate with key presses. Both of these instruments are also available with matching stands and triple pedal options. And in the case of the Casio, it is available in 3 different colors. You can get this in black, you can get it in white, and you can get it in a rather striking red. So to wrap up, we've got 2 instruments that really offer a similar but different value at almost an identical price point. This is going to be a tricky decision, and I really see this as a battle of equals, honestly. And that's not something that Casio really had any right saying, say, 10 years ago, but the progress that this company has made is really quite impressive. The quality control and the quality of the tone generator specifically has certainly brought Casio up to the point where in this price range, it is absolutely competing with, and in some cases exceeding, the level of nuance and sophistication that you get from some of the biggest companies out there. So we've got the battle of portability with battery versus something that fits nicely in to a little home studio situation. You've got a piano where the piano tone itself is more editable and probably a little more nuanced versus something that's certainly functional but slightly more basic. We've got a difference in the speaker setup and a slight difference in the connectivity options as well, Bluetooth versus not. So for people who hate reading through spec sheets and trying to understand exactly what the difference is, I hope this video has helped go through those differences in a slightly more engaging, entertaining way. And brought you a little closer to being able to make a decision on your next digital piano. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Stu Harrison. This has been Merriam Pianos on YouTube. We hope you will subscribe and become part of our community. Let us know what you thought about the video, and we'll see you again soon.